Hello and welcome to another Beyond All Reason video analysis. I'm your host Zateo, and today we're going to be looking at Bleppers, playing as our dark green player at the top here. This is Supreme Strait playing as these weak seaside. Let's get into it. This is an on-the-fly review. I'm not taking any notes beforehand, so it's always possible that I miss a few things. Alright, so here right away I will say that you could make this a little bit more optimal if you were able to grab two mexes first. I would recommend probably this one and then this one, and then and then a wind turbine and then a third one. So you don't really need this turbine quite this early. You want it after the mechs here, and that'll just give you a little bit more metal to be a little bit more efficient here. And then before lab, you usually want like 3 wind turbines. Of course, it depends on how strong the wind is. And right now, it's weak enough that you need 3, but at the same time, let's see, is there overflow? No overflow from your team quite yet. Yeah, so this is just building a bit slower than it could be building. It could be a little bit faster. Looks like you pull off when it's 99% done, a little bit unfortunate. But yeah, you eat a tree. And now you're just cranking out a grave robber. Yeah, so the grave robber, of course, will help you eat these trees to get your energy up. But you do still need to start with at least 2 to 3 wind turbines. Sometimes 4 or 5 if the wind really dies down. And if it's like super low, you might as well just get a solar first. And then, get a solar, get 2 winds, and then get your bot lab. And that solar will just be more consistent and you don't rely on it dipping down or whatnot. So now the wind is quite nice, and no overflow yet from your team. Looks like you produce an anti-air bot first. That's a little bit different. Looks like the anti-air bots. Okay, so you're trying to control the island here. So that makes sense. I mean, there are plays where a player will transport over a commander to the islands ASAP and start grabbing it. So it looks like you're trying to grab that ASAP yourself, or trying to deny it as soon as you can. But yeah, here your energy is still quite low. So before your anti-air bot, I would actually recommend getting this bot sooner. Get this bot first. If you want, I guess you could get the anti-air bot after the first constructor, but it is very, very important to have more build power out, so that you can start grabbing these more, the mechs out here, and then also, starting to add on some more wind here, because 2 turbines is not enough to really do much for you, and so you're building stuff very slowly because of it. So anytime your energy dips to 0, I would highly recommend building on more energy first before building anything else. Just like rearrange how you're building something to get that energy so you can actually build it efficiently. Now you start moving your commander down, presumably to go towards the sea. You got another construction bot grabbing some more mexes, so that's good. That's really good to see. It is very important to try to grab as much metal as you can as early as you can, so that you benefit from it as fast as you can. Let's see another bot coming out. This one's heading towards the Geo. I would say it's definitely too early for Geo here. You can't effectively produce it. I mean, you do have a couple of res bots back here eating up the trees here, so maybe you do have enough for something. I don't know. I feel like you need a couple more wins at least here to be able to get a Geo efficiently. We'll have to take a look once you start building it to see if you need more wins or not. But yeah, you're grabbing your mexes. That's all very important. This lab, I feel like you could use a couple more builders. Just to start building on like a bunch of winds. You could like build it here, or you could build it down over here, or wherever you want to build a bunch of wind. Wind is very good on this map. Wind, in fact, is basically, in terms of metal cost, going to be about as efficient as an APHIS. They just take you have to build a lot of winds for it to actually equal out. But in terms of metal cost, yeah, it's more efficient. Or it's as efficient as an APHIS, I should say, at 14.2. And that's using Cortex numbers. If you were Armada, then wind would actually be better than an Aphis, because Armada wind is so much cheaper. So your commander here building your shipyard. Find spot for it. Actually, is it possible to get it a little bit closer? You could get it like one spot up, but yeah, okay. So that's reasonable, a reasonable spot for it. So you're getting some build power down here as well with this constructor. This is all pretty standard play in this kind of position. To get your bot lab first, but then eventually get a shipyard and have your bots adding on some turrets so you can quickly build more ships, and then you can properly fight the sea. Because this player is much closer to the sea, so they can just build a shipyard really quickly. So it's a little bit easier for them to do so. Let's see, what else are you doing? Okay, so commander's moving out now to grab the islands. Your anti-air bot is there already, kind of, making sure that it's safe just by scouting. And okay, so as this geo's going up, you're stalling pretty significantly. Usually, when it comes to building something that takes a while, you want multiple constructors on it, so that you can build it much quicker and benefit from it much quicker. And that's where some of these extra con bots would help out here. Looks like you are adding on a couple more. So I think this guy was just produced, and this guy is now on his way. And then you have a construction turret here, so that's good, because this construction turret can assist whatever you're building, obviously, around here. And it's a good opportunity to start building on a bunch of winds in the vicinity. Now, if you wanted to, you could ask your air player. Let's see, not that one, this one. Yeah, you could ask your air player for transport. They're very cheap to do. And if they want payments, you could either give them some metal to pay for it. A lot of people in higher up lobbies will opt to just kind of give a wind turbine as payments, because the wind turbine is of similar cost, and it'll benefit them because air units cost extra energy. So it's kind of nice to have a little bit more winds. But yeah, you could transport your construction turret actually up here to the geo to build it faster. And then you can always transport it back once the geo is finished. So here, your commander's moving out, runs into a herring, takes it out. Oh, okay, so there's this muskrat that's eating your anti-air bot. Bit unfortunate. They might be able to grab the hill if your commander doesn't get there in time. He's on his way, so I think it'll be fine. But yeah, you're running into a lot of energy issues here. So again, wind is basically as good as an Aphis. It just takes a lot more time to build. And so it's, when it comes to this early on, it's totally fine to build just a huge array of wind turbines. And you don't need to worry about getting rid of them unless they're in your way. And it'll just benefit you for the rest of the game, basically. Yeah, so a lot like this. This is actually pretty good. This player here is even leaving a bit of space here for walking. And it also makes it harder so that they don't chain together when they get bombed and stuff like that. So this is quite nice. This metal storage, I'd say you don't need. There's just no reason to really do it. So if your metal's high, it's kind of better to just let it overflow into your teammates, and fix the actual issue. Because by doing this, you're making you're basically using energy to put down a metal storage, and you need the energy to use your metal. You need energy and build power probably in this case. So having those winds will help, and then just having more construction turrets being placed will help that as well. The only time you really need a storage is if you're reclaiming a ton of stuff, and when I say a ton, I mean a ton, or you're doing something like eating a T2 factory, reclaiming it, because the T2 factory is 2,900 metal, and you just can't store it all without having a storage. Let's see. Okay, so unfortunately here, your commander is found by these frigates here. So if this happens, I would suggest, instead of trying to run up the hill here, because you might make it, you might not. And if you don't, you're just losing your commander for nothing. And then the hill goes to them, and the reclaim from the commander goes to them. So what I would actually suggest is for your commander to move out, back into the water. And then these frigates, they don't have a weapon that can attack under the water, whereas the commander does. So the commander can actually pursue these guys then at that point, you know, as long as he's under the water. Because the laser that the commander has can shoot out of the water. But yeah, unfortunately this looks like you're going to lose the commander. And now that's a bunch of metal that goes to them that can make them stronger. So that's going to put you in a rough spot. So after that, you know, ideally, of course, again, you'd have a lot more energy coming in with that wind. So here I would try to pump out a lot of ships. And if you feel like you're not going to be able to contest the ships that they have, I would just reclaim this shipyard and get the metal back for it, because it's just not going to be enough probably. Because right now you're just adding on construction turrets still to assist the ships that are coming out, but by the time yellow comes over here, he could easily just take out this shipyard because there's not going to be much here because all the time's being spent on these construction turrets. Also, by the way, when you start running out of metal, start eating these rocks here. Very important. Quite a bit of metal in those. And it's actually less than I thought. It's, you know, 250 total, which is not nothing, by the way. It's definitely significant. But yeah, anytime you start having a lot of metal, there's something you need to fix. And, you know, in this case, it's energy. And other times it might be build power if you have the energy and still are starting to rack up some metal. And then, yeah, doing this storage is not really useful right now either because you just don't have the energy to store. Storages are mostly useful when you have a lot of winds. And that just helps you have like a battery of energy for that, you know, so that when the wind dips down, you still have energy to use. That's the main function of those storages. And you're getting some converters here. I'd say, yeah, your energy does not provide enough for these either, so I wouldn't get these yet. If anything, you know, maybe get one, because if you start accessing energy, then you can convert it. Now, if you're still accessing, then add on a second one. And if you're still accessing after that, add on a third one. Like, you don't want just like a huge array of converters. Whoops, I clicked on a button. Alright, back to your view. Alright, so you got your geo up. Unfortunately, these cons are just sitting here now. They should probably put a radar down. And by the way, when you move your commander down here, I'd highly recommend either with your commander or with a construction bot, you know, put down a radar on, you know, in this area. And then as your commander moves down, like, you know, say put a radar there, but as your commander moves down, put another radar somewhere out here, or just like, you know, anywhere out here really. And that way you can spot for ships that are out here and know if it's safe to go up the hill or not. You know, knowing is half the battle for sure, and, you know, radar is very cheap, so in my opinion radar is actually one of the best units in the game because it provides you that information. Just 60 metal to produce one, and they build rather quickly, so really no harm in getting a few out there. But yeah, note that if you put one out on the shore here, you won't be able to see past this cliff. So yeah, having a second one up here is nice. That's an interesting construction turret here. Usually you'd want the construction turret before the geo, not necessarily after. I suppose if you're building like anti-air or something up there, it could be useful. So yeah, here, unfortunately, I mean, you can kind of expect that yellow is going to have more ships because they just start so close to the water. You know, so you can see there's a yellow blip out here, and then you can see 3 ships here. And they can clearly contest your three ships, or they're probably going to be able to contest your 3 ships, because there might be even more out here. So this just kind of highlights how important that radar is. So you just know what's there, or how many dots are there before you even engage with them. So unfortunately, yeah, and yellow's doing a good job of target fire. Oh yeah, so now there's, you know, 5 ships here, and so this is kind of a rough spot for you. And unfortunately, you're going to lose all those ships. At this point, like as you see yourself losing this battle here, you know, I would definitely try to reclaim this with your turrets here. Because having, like, you're not going to be able to produce enough ships to fight this off right now, and they're so close to your base that this is for sure going to die. And then after you eat the shipyard, you could start trying to eat these construction turrets too, and just, you know, get back as much of that metal as you can. Yeah, you're trying to build some torpedo launchers, but yeah, I don't think it's going to be fast enough here, because the ships are basically there already, so they just take it out. Constructor's going to die, consorts are going to die, and now the shipyard is going to be in trouble. So yeah, unfortunate, but that could be avoided with radar, and just, you know, seeing that it's coming and eating your stuff, if it does happen. So usually in this kind of position, if you are going to try to play C, you know, and contest C, I should say, you know, you want to try to put more juice into this. You want to put more metal, more build power into it in order to successfully pull it off. And it's still going to be hard to do. You know, having those construction turrets, you know, it's good for the long term, you know, but I'd try to build them a little bit faster and try to produce out of here a lot more. Okay, you got a T2 bot now too, but yeah, so you know, after you're done using your bot lab and you have your constructors out, you have your res bots out, and whatever else you may need, reclaim it. Very important. By reclaiming it, you get 100% back in terms of metal, and the lab is 620 metal. You know, so that's 620 metal that could be put into more ships, type of thing. Or even if you're not building ships, at this point, since you're upgrading to T2 mexes, you know, they cost a lot more metal. They cost 640 here, you know, whereas the regular ones are only 50. You know, it's gonna take a while because you don't have the metal for it. You know, so by eating this lab, you can get this faster. You know, and if you didn't have these storages, you'd also be able to eat the, you know, to build this faster. Yeah, kind of speed it up a bit. Okay, so this is your third max actually, so that's good. I would say after 3 mexes, you want to kind of look at your energy and just see where it's at. If you were building wind turbines from the get-go and building them kind of fervently, then you would have a lot more winds to be able to power this. But because you don't, I would suggest building a fusion first. And I would suggest building it by your construction turret and where your build power is. And that way you can afford things out of here much more easily. Yeah, I think with this position, you know, given that you have a couple of cons to help and only one constructor that's immobile, since your build power is mostly mobile, I would suggest maybe even grabbing this first. But if you feel like you need it now, then you need it now. But given that's, you know that the C player built frigates and stuff, like they have a lot of money in the water right now, and they're not going to be able to just like crawl up onto land at this point in the game. You know, so you could greed a little bit harder and grab this max. I wouldn't worry about these back here because obviously those are very close to the shore and they can just pick them off. This one I wouldn't really worry about too much either. It's just 1 max, and you know, it's far enough away that I wouldn't really worry about it. Yeah, so here it's good that you're getting more construction turrets. It's good that you're getting this fusion. The only thing is you got all this money you just spent here that could have helped you get this sooner. And then of course after that you get, you know, at least 1 converter, T2 converter, and then you can build this a bit more easily. And actually, I almost forgot this spot has the Geo. So given that, after 3 mexes, I would grab the Geo. Geos are the most efficient form of energy in the game, unless wind is crazy high, and I'm talking like significantly higher than it is here, and it's pretty good on Supreme Strait, so it's very rare for it to be better than this. Um, but yeah, basically the Geo costs a lot less than a Fusion. A Fusion is 4,500, whereas the Geo is only 1,500. So it's 1/3 of the cost, and you get more energy out of it than you do from a Fusion. Um, so I saw you do a little bit of micro. I don't know if you microed between these mexes, but as this third mex was being finished is when you added on the T2 lab. Um, so in this case, if you're trying to get the Geo, I would say, start this with your builder, and then just like as you have other builders assist it, send your T2 builder down here to build this right away. And by the time he gets there, the mex will be either done or about done, and you can spend all that metal upgrading your Geo. T1 Geos, by the way, also very good in terms of efficiency, but nothing trumps a hazardous T2 Geo. Alright, so it looks like you're producing some arbiters. So arbiters are going to be able to push these ships away, which it's a good idea. I would say it's not completely and utterly necessary. You could still be greeding for more stuff even after this fusion, and just getting like an Aphis right after, or say you could get this advanced Geo, and then go right into Aphis after that. And it looks like you're already starting to do like a block for that later tier stuff. Let's see. Okay, so fusion's finishing up. You're adding on the converter now, so that's all good. Yeah, if you are dead set on getting these arbiters, I'd say produce these arbiters and then get rid of your lab. And again, if you're going to reclaim your T2 lab, you want the storage. And you already have that storage, so like it's you could just eat it, totally fine. Let's see. Yeah, and also you still got this T1 lab sitting here that isn't being used. So anytime you're not using something, like in terms of a lab, reclaim it, because then that metal can go into other things that you're trying to do. And if you want to build the T1 lab or the T2 lab again, you can. Again, it's 100% return, so there's really no problem with that. Let's see, the ships are over here being annoying. Yeah, it looks like you're sending these fiends out here to help the front. I feel like it's not really necessary. I mean, it's kind of nice to support them down there, but so here's the way to look at this. So in a situation like this where you're trying to decide like, okay, should I maybe support the front right here, or should I, what can I do basically, trying to figure out what to do. I would take a look at these players. As it is right now, green is teching up, doing some eco. Purple's doing air, all as well, basically. And the front's doing pretty good. There's no real reason to really push hard here. And the thing to consider, I suppose, with pushing the fronts is just what happens as a front gets pushed. And that's going to be kind of map specific in some cases. On Supreme Strait, also known as Supreme Isthmus now, as that's more correct. As players at the front here die, then the players back here have more incentive and usually help out more. Or if it's a really bad situation, the back line will start helping out, type of thing. Or maybe this player helps out. But either way, they're probably not going to like end the game right now. There's just not enough to end the game. So you sending some units out here does not really help them. In a way, it just kind of sets you back. It sets you back because you could be building other stuff, like another like an Aphis. This second fusion, by the way, you don't really. I would just go for an Aphis. This is more if you're trying to produce a bunch of units and still get some economy, but honestly, it's more of like a frontline, type thing. Um, so yeah, that's how you would think about that situation. Um, Now another thing that could happen is you could ask your air player to do more scouting and just see if they could possibly get some scouts into the enemy base to see what's going on. And then you can see where yellow's at, you can see where, all these other players are at, and you can make an informed decision on what you want to do next. Um, and in this kind of situation where you don't really have a super strong economy yet, you're just still building up, I would just greed for that stuff a little bit harder. Um, I do want to talk about all the stuff you're building here really quick as well, because you kind of have a lot going on right now, considering you only have one fusion. You only have so many mexes, and so your metal income's even below 50. So, trying to build all this stuff, it adds up, and if it adds up to more than your income, now all of a sudden, all this stuff is building a little bit slower. And so it's just a lot going on right now. I try to suggest building one thing at a time, especially when it comes to more expensive stuff. Not that any of the stuff is super expensive for you right now, but it's just a lot happening. Um, and so your metal um, could be used more on one thing at a time to get that one thing faster. So instead of having an anti-nuke by 16 minutes, you could have an anti-nuke by, like 15 minutes or 14 minutes, depending on how much more optimized you get with the other stuff. Obviously, that will adjust everything as well. Um, but yeah, so since you're building, this fusion, you're building a converter, you're building some more turrets, you're building the anti-nuke, you're building units, like it's just a lot going on. A lot of places to split your metal income into. Um, so yeah, I highly recommend doing one thing at a time. Like if you feel like you need units, don't build the fusion, don't build the converter. Um, and in fact, I would say you might want to consider more defense here, because soon, um, it's gonna be time for players to, they can make plays in your location. At your spot. Like, obviously brown and orange are probably a little bit preoccupied with how forward the position is here for your players. But yellow could very easily just transition into something like hovercraft instead of going full-blown ship and sea. They could just do, they could just mass up a lot of hovercraft and just run right straight into here. All you really have is a tower here, or a couple towers actually, and a couple of arbiters, which will not stop a mass amount of hovercraft. Um, so keep that in mind as you might want more here. So to remedy that, you might want units out to defend that type of thing. Um, I mean, I suppose like some fiends over there would be okay against mass hovercraft, but obviously, it might not be hovercraft. It could be something else. So, getting information to make the correct call there can be really important. Um, But yeah, I would consider building some units for that. Um, but another way to do it is you could just build defenses and get rid of the lab altogether. And that way, you get all that metal back to make the defenses quickly and start doing some of this stuff more quickly as well. Because that is a lot of metal to be sitting here, just in the lab. Um, for defenses, I would recommend stuff like the Scorpion. Um, let's go to the builder here. Let's see, defenses. Yeah, so Scorpion is the pop-up. I believe it's a missile. Yeah, rocket launcher for Cortex. Um, does pretty well. It's pretty cheap compared to these other defenses here. Persecutor has a lot more range, so it can shoo away a lot. Shoo away ships and stuff. Bulwark would be more like if you're dealing with T3. On this map, for example, what are they called? Marauders. Marauders, can be a pain. and bulwarks and scorpions do okay against them. Persecutor does okay as well, but um, it is quite expensive for a persecutor, whereas a bulwark has multiple lasers and all these different bells and whistles. Um, to do pretty well there. Um, but yeah, if you're gonna do that, I'd recommend stopping your economy for a little bit. The anti-nuke is important, definitely get that. But putting some defenses down here or some units, ideally defenses, because a lot of units aren't gonna do too well, unless you get some more expensive stuff like mammoths or I suppose like a line of sumos would be okay. Um, But yeah, so you get the units first, and then after you get a bunch of units, and you feel like this is enough to be safe right now, then you eat the lab, and you spend that money on fusions and stuff. By the way, this anti-nuke, um, it's hugging the wall quite a bit here. It's very much just going to cover you, um, and it's going to cover the coast here. So like it's kind of important to have something there. But arguably, you could put the anti-nuke um, like more right here ish, because as it is, you basically want anti-nuke to cover as many allies as you can, while also, of course, covering yourself to the full extent. So if you put it in this location here, you now can cover green a bit more, or light green, I should say, because as it is, the anti-nuke, the other anti-nukes, like green has one here and blue has one. The anti-nuke radius are these white circles, um, and your anti-nuke ends here. So poor light green here, he has this really big, uh, gap right in the middle of his base, where he could be nuked. So then he also needs to get an anti-nuke if he wants to prevent that. So it's just like a lot of extra money going into anti-nuke when yours could potentially cover his, and still cover the bottom here a bit. But yeah, one thing at a time. If you wanted to greed instead of getting defenses in units, again, eat this. Don't produce out of that. Maybe go for the anti-nuke first and then get the fusion. And I'd say you're definitely building on a bit too much build power at this time. You want to start with just a few, because you can't really, like, you're not even utilizing a lot of this build power because you just don't have the money for it. So I would just try to build them on a little bit more as needed type of thing. If you were about to get like a huge sum of metal from like a commander explosion, or there's like a lot of wrecks you're eating, then it kind of makes sense to overbuild build power just a little bit. But here, this, even for that, would be way too much. Yeah, it's doing a little bit slower would be better. You are building on some pinpointers, so that's nice. That's a good help for your team. Yeah, pretty soon it's going to be time for players on the other team to try to make plays running up here. So you want to consider defenses. And again, in terms of like greeding for economy, you don't need 2 fusions. Just get 1. You'd want 2 if you're if you're also producing some units, or if you're frontline, you need it done now, type of thing. But you don't really need it if the next thing you're building is an Aphis. You could just go straight into the Aphis. And again, I really want to, hammer this in. Reclaim these labs, especially if you're not going to use it. And then when you want to use a lab again, build the lab again. And that also allows you to build a different lab if you want. You could, for example, switch into hovercraft. You could build a T3 lab instead. You could, do a vehicle lab instead, or whatever it may be. You now have the metal for it. Okay, commando, nice. I like commando plays. So this makes sense in terms of trying to take this. I'd say you want to really get rid of all these ships out here first so they don't see it. So I'm curious to know how you're going to do that. Okay, it looks like you're producing ducks. Yeah, so the other thing to consider with this is, you know, when you try to do things like produce a bunch of units out of the lab and get the fusion, or, you know, and add on economy in this kind of way, or in any kind of way, really, you know, you're splitting your metal income into these things as well as the units. You know, whereas you could put it all into the economy and get more money for later to produce more units with, or you could try some cheeky play and produce, you know, a bunch of units and then get the economy stuff. You know, and that would just allow you to produce more units more quickly, so you can make that play sooner. You know, instead of this turning into a situation where, you know, you know, Aphis gets done at like, you know, 23 minutes and you've produced like 10 ducks. Well, instead you could produce no Aphis until, you know, slightly later, you know, like a minute or two, and have like a big blob of ducks. And that big blob of ducks could actually like get somewhere and do some stuff. Or if you ate the lab and didn't produce ducks, then you could have the Aphis sooner, like, you know, having it, you know, 2 or 3 minutes sooner. You know, and then you can produce the ducks afterwards, or, you know, there's lots of different things you can do, but this is just too much at once. So I'm curious to know where this commando goes. I do like commando plays. One of my favorite units. Yeah, so you are sending it over to the island here. See that yellow doesn't have a ton of ships there. Okay, so the SAM site kills the transport. Commando lands in the water right before reaching up there. Oh, interesting. Yeah, you can build that far away with the commando. So Dragon's Maw to take out this stuff. Now, I feel like this isn't really necessary. Like, I would probably just send the commando up, because the commando can lay mines, and you know, mines are very cheap, you know, compared to a Dragon's Maw, you know, which is, you know, $300. And you could just take this stuff out with mines, and then you don't have to worry about this. But I suppose, you know, you could use this, you know, for anything that tries to intercept the commando and stuff like that. So I suppose it's an alright play. It's just not what I would have necessarily gone with. Air commander can move up and start destroying this stuff. Ooh, big raid over here. Oh, what happened to blue? Okay, apparently blue got nuked and I missed it. Yeah, something happened there. Yeah, so anytime you start losing players like that, especially when it's your strong player, something should go off in your head to just say that, okay, now we're a bit behind. If we stay the course, the enemy team will just be ahead, because now we're kind of down a player in a way. Like that player that got nuked is now recuperating, so now we need to make something happen. Otherwise, you know, like happen now, otherwise, you know, the other team's just going to be ahead. Assuming that everyone's of the same skill and all that, and they're doing like the same similar kind of stuff. So yeah, it makes even more sense to not greed too hard for economy, and instead try to just produce something like ducks to make something happen. Now here, now that your metal income's like over 100, you could do stuff like spam, or you could consider doing like T3 units or something like that. Personally on this map, I like hovercraft spam a lot. It's something that's not oftentimes considered. You know, when it comes to spam, people usually think of like grunts or pawns or ticks or something like that, and they just, you know, produce them quickly out of bot labs and just send them in immediately. The same thing can be done with hovercraft, but since it's less common to see that, it actually would make a lot of sense to build up a lot of hovercrafts first, and then show up with like a lot of hovercraft, and then you can kind of catch them with their pants down, and they just don't have defenses for it, and you can destroy them. And then, you know, behind the blob of hovercrafts, you could also have that trickle of spam coming in to support as well. And, you know, it'd be something I think worth trying in this situation. Um, but yeah, there's like, stuff like T3. Speaking of T3, here's some Marauders. Hello. Um, but yeah, here again, this is actually all the way up to 24 minutes almost. And these Marauders finally show up. And, you just don't have much here. And I would say given the location that you're in, you can kind of expect that eventually someone's going to be trying to land something here. Um, in this case, it is the C player, and it is Marauders, which is a pretty common thing. So again, Scorpions, Bulwarks, Persecutors, all pretty good stuff there. Now, if you know it's going to be like T3, at this point, like making some Mammoths for down there would be useful. Mammoths do pretty good against things like Marauders. Now, note, Marauders are like 600 some bucks, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering correctly. Or I'm sorry, 970. Flip that 6 around to make it a 9. But yeah, it's like $1,000 per Marauder, and a Mammoth is over 2,000 bucks for a Mammoth. But they do quite well against Marauders, so it's pretty good. But yeah, unfortunately, this is basically it. Oh yeah, I think I saw Red get like a nice, amphibious tank over there. He had like a bunch of them that destroyed the place. So now your team is like really far down because they have 2 players lost, and one of those players happened to be the blue player. So now, big trouble, and now you're losing this, so it is actually a pretty good time to start thinking about a resign, because this is pretty grim at this point. Now, in some cases, if these back players are really, really, really good at the game, it is possible for them to still win. It's just, given that they're not like some crazy like top tier player, these guys are just your average like 30 some type of players. There's a low chance for them to actually successfully win the game from here. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that it is possible. But yeah, with these Marauders coming in, it's not too much defense here. Now, I'd say, yeah, there's these Cataphracts are, they do well against Marauders in a fight, but the thing is, the Marauders can just run past them. So these aren't even going to help all that much. The thing that you'd want here, by the way, if you are Cortex, is perhaps some Shivas. I would say, if you're Armada, Razorback is quite good against Marauders. Obviously against this minion you need quite a few of them, but and Shivas, they're not like the best thing against Marauders, but like they're cheap enough that you can produce a bunch of them. I suppose Cataphracts are pretty cheap too. They're even cheaper, but they just don't do all that much DPS and stuff, so it's not that useful. And there we go. There's the resign. But to sum up a little bit of some of what you're doing, first and foremost, the radar I think is probably the biggest thing and easy enough to fix, right? You just place on a couple of radars, like one for the hill, one for the coast, and then one for the sea. And that way, as you move your commander through, you're getting vision of the area ahead of it, so that you know that he's going to be safe. And so then you get over here, maybe even before, like I would say before you exit where your radar ends, or before your commander goes beyond where the radar is, build another radar to just kind of scout ahead and see what's up there or what's out there. When your commander was around here and you're getting attacked by the ships, I'd consider running back into the sea, especially because those ships cannot attack under the water, so the commander cannot be hit by those frigates under the water, and the commander's laser can actually shoot over the water, or out of the water I should say, so he could actually contest those frigates a little bit, type of thing, and then you'd be able to contest this a bit more. In terms of your base, I would say, once you stop using something like this T1 lab, get rid of it, scrap it, use the metal that you gain from it to pump out ships or pump out economy more. Once your opponents is out here, and anytime you think you're going to lose the lab, try to reclaim that as well to get that 100% back. Um, Rex, by the way, they give 60% back. So if something does die, like there's that chance that it leaves the full wreck, and you can at least get something back. Um, but then after all that happens, oh yeah, I forgot to mention the winds. So your energy was very poor until you got that fusion done, basically. Um, and I'm actually surprised it wasn't even lower than it was, but I suppose the geo was helping you out in that regard. Um, but yeah, having a lot of wind is not bad on this map. Again, they are more efficient in terms of metal cost than a basic fusion. That doesn't mean you shouldn't ever get a fusion, because a fusion can add a lot of energy on at once if you need it. And if you don't have the winds for it, like say some of that wind got destroyed, or say you got the T2 builder way before you were able to add on a bunch of wind, it's still reasonable to get a fusion, um, and get that fusion before the T2 lab. And then, um, in this position, um, I would say, you don't really need to produce units that super early. You could actually just build on your APHIS after the fusion. But again, get the Geo instead of the fusion. Don't get a basic fusion at all, actually. Um, Unless like you felt like you were in trouble and you needed some units, but you still need some energy first. Um, for example, like if you grab this fusion, you added on a couple of converters for it, and then you realize like, oh, this is kind of the time when an enemy might come up the shore. So let's, or yeah, say it's a time that an enemy could come up the shore, but you still need energy. So you kind of want units and energy. Well, instead of building something really big like an APHIS, you could potentially just get a regular fusion first, um, and then build a bunch of units to defend with, and then get the APHIS later. Um, but yeah, given how this game wins and stuff, like the attack wasn't until much later, and so you could have greeted more. And the way that you'd be able to know that is by asking your air player if they could scout for you. Um, obviously on this map there is usually a dedicated air player, so you can't guarantee that you're going to be able to just see everything. Um, you can assume that you're going to get shot down, and it makes it sound like a dumb idea to scout. But any information that you get whatsoever can be important and useful. And so if an air player does scout, try to watch what they see. Try to pay attention to what the yellow player is actually doing. Um, and then that'll help you decide if you need to defend or not. And obviously you can't know what every player is doing. It could be a different player that comes in and attacks you. But that's just kind of how it goes. So it's kind of like rolling the dice, no matter what, it's rolling the dice in some way, and it's like, okay, do you want the APHIS? Do you want to, go harder into economy, or do you want to go units? I would not suggest trying to do both, because that just means both things are done not as well, not as quickly, um, and then you start getting into trouble. So that's probably the other really big takeaway here is just that. Um, But yeah, I hope you learned something from this. Feel free to ask me some questions either in the comments or in the thread that was created. Um, and I'll see you around. Thanks for watching.